He thought he understood everything about love, loyalty, and forgiveness, until one small detail shattered his sense of certainty. Subtle, but too precise to be coincidence. From that moment on, his silence spoke louder than any confession. She says nothing happened, and he remembers the time he once said those same words, and everything they were hiding. When the past returns in the most unexpected form, every gesture becomes evidence, every "it's fine" a trap. He's determined to uncover the truth. But once he finds it, can he live with it? Where there was once trust, now there's a question. One. Simple. Corrosive. What if she's lying? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watched this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. Gavin opens with the observation that there are endless ways to discover your spouse is being unfaithful or is about to cross that line. The most blatant, he says, is catching them red-handed, walking into your own bedroom to find a stranger in bed with your wife. But for him, suspicions about Heather didn't erupt from such a cinematic scene. It happened on an especially cold Saturday. One of Gavin's chores that weekend was to swap Heather's regular tires for snow ones on her escape. He can still recall the grin on his face as he slipped into the car and felt the warmth blasting from the seat heater, set to the highest notch. Before heading to the tire shop, he turned it down and idled while the staff did their job. By the time he got back home, Heather was already dressed, about to leave. "I'm heading to the mall," she told him. "Want me to grab anything for you?" she asked. Now, some men might brace for the worst, visions of credit card debt swirling in their heads, but Heather was always careful with her spending. She brought home her own paycheck, avoided impulsive buys, and if anything, her absence meant he could watch the game in peace. Still, Heather wasn't going to let him turn into a couch potato. "Don't spend your whole day glued to football," she warned him. "The kids deserve some time with their dad." "Of course," Gavin agreed. Heather was gone for about 3 hours, and when she came back, she carried a single small bag. For a long mall trip, that hardly raised an eyebrow. Then something popped into Gavin's mind. "I think I left my sunglasses in your car," he said. "They're in the center console," she replied. So, he went outside to fetch them. When he opened the door, something caught his attention. The driver's seat warmer was cranked to 3 again, but what was odd was the passenger seat. It, too, was set to a comfortable 2, and he could tell it had recently been slid back a couple inches. Back in the kitchen, he tried to sound casual. "Did you shop with someone today?" She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, her face unreadable. "No, why?" Her hesitation spoke volumes. "No big deal." He shrugged, feigning disinterest. "You were out a while, thought maybe you met a friend for lunch." "Nope. I was by myself," she said, turning her attention to the dishes. But Gavin couldn't shake off the memory of that warmed passenger seat. He told Heather he'd be downstairs tackling a few things from her to-do list. In the quiet of the basement, his mind started racing. 30 minutes later, all the small warning signs began snapping together. Lately, Heather came home from work, but didn't share anything about her day. She'd been dropping the ball with family matters, acting forgetful and distracted. Even tiny annoyances set her off. How did Gavin recognize the pattern? It wasn't hard. He'd lived it before. His first marriage had ended with betrayal, but it was he who had cheated. He was the one who'd show up late, blame work, and forget simple things his wife Chloe had asked for. He was the husband who made mountains out of molehills, starting pointless fights. The affair, with a colleague, had lasted 4 months before Chloe found out. It started the way these things often do. Innocent office banter, sharing frustrations over lunch, talking about everything missing in their marriages. Eventually, boundaries blurred. Chloe had never doubted him. She never would have, except that the husband of the woman Gavin was seeing had hired a private investigator, who delivered the proof in photos. Chloe was devastated, unable to believe Gavin would betray her. Even after his promises and apologies, she filed for divorce. "Why would I believe you this time?" she'd asked. "You swore you wouldn't do it again, and yet here we are." 3 months later, their marriage was over. Gavin admits he truly loved Chloe. The affair had been reckless, driven by ego and stupidity, a pointless mistake that destroyed everything. He kept telling himself it was nothing, that it wouldn't touch his real life. Looking back, he sees how naive that was. Roughly a year after the split, Gavin left Atlanta for Seattle. 2 years after that, he met Heather, and they eventually married. He was upfront about his divorce, but glossed over the details, blaming immaturity, not infidelity. He told himself it wasn't a lie, exactly. He just didn't want to create doubt. He swore he was done with that life. He would never hurt Heather the way he had hurt Chloe. They'd been married 6 years when temptation found its way back into his world. By then, they had 2 beautiful children together. Twice a year, Gavin's job sent him to Dallas for company training sessions, always with roughly the same group of 20 colleagues. They all got to know each other pretty well. Well enough, in fact, that whispers of office romances circulated. One person in that group stood out: Kimberly Brooks from Cleveland. She was striking, lively, and seemed to gravitate toward Gavin whenever she could. They would chat during breaks, over lunch, gradually growing closer. On Gavin's 4th trip to Dallas, Kimberly invited him to join her and some others for dinner. 7 people in total. What could possibly happen? They had a great evening, followed by drinks and dancing at a bar nearby, the hours flying by in what felt like seconds. At some point, Gavin checked his watch. The clock showed midnight in Dallas, but it was still only 10 o'clock back in Seattle. Quietly, I left the bar without alerting anyone. When I made it to my hotel, I pulled out my phone and called Heather. After 2 rings, she answered, her words heavy with drowsiness. "It's Gavin," I whispered. "I'm sorry if I woke you," I said, guilt nagging at me. She answered softly, "Don't worry about it, love. I'm just glad to hear your voice." "I realize it's late," I went on. "I just finished a late meal and a few drinks with everyone. I called because I wanted you to know I love you," I continued as I headed toward my room. "Should I ring you again after I settle in?" "No, darling. Just hearing you is enough," she said. She then asked, "How was your day?" "It dragged on forever," I confessed. "I'm flying out tomorrow at 3 a.m. I should land in Seattle by 6:30, so I'll be home for a late supper. I really miss you." "We miss you here too. The kids keep asking about you," Heather replied. "Fly safe, okay? We can't wait to have you back." I wanted nothing more than to keep her on the line, but I knew Heather needed her rest. She was balancing her job, taking care of the kids, and running the house by herself. That kind of workload could exhaust anyone, and I wanted her to be well rested when I got back. We exchanged our "I love yous," and I ended the call just as I arrived at my hotel door. I collapsed onto the bed, letting out a long sigh. That was a narrow escape. One more drink, another dance, and if I'd bumped into Kimberly again, things could have gone further tonight. What pulled me back was remembering all the red flags from the affair that destroyed my first marriage. As I lay there, I made a silent vow not to repeat my mistakes with Heather like I had with Chloe, and for the next 4 years, I stuck to that commitment. I steered clear of Kimberly Brooks and avoided a few other temptations that surfaced along the way. I wasn't a celebrity, but I learned that change was possible with determination. I kept my promise, and as far as I could see, so did Heather. With a renewed sense of commitment, I climbed the stairs and entered our kitchen. Seth and Becca, our 2 kids, were at the table chatting with Heather as she prepared dinner. Staying true was challenging, but it was worth it. Still, I sometimes wondered if Heather had been just as steadfast. Had she ever crossed that subtle line? Was there another person? Where did her loyalty lie? When I entered the kitchen and grabbed a beer from the fridge, I noticed Heather's eyes on me. I slid into a chair beside the kids, joining the lively conversation. Heather looked over, her face warm with a smile, and for a brief moment, I was sure she still loved me. But I couldn't shake the thought, if she cared so much, why risk it all? Or was I just imagining things? That weekend, I acted as if nothing was wrong, keeping my doubts to myself. Sunday morning, we even made love before going to church. By Monday, I asked my manager if I could take a little personal leave. He didn't ask questions and quickly agreed. I made a few calls and set up an appointment with a private detective. That afternoon, I sat in the reception area at Sullivan Investigations, waiting for Jake Sullivan. When the receptionist summoned me, I stepped into Jake's office. Jake was a large man, and he reminded me of a character from an old TV show my dad used to watch on VHS tapes, the one with the mustache. What was his name? Frank Conrad, maybe? Jake caught the look on my face and chuckled. You're thinking of William Conrad, who played Frank Cannon, right? People tell me that a lot. I can't read minds, but I see that expression all the time. My wife wants me to shave the mustache, but I think it gives me a little personality. After some small talk, we got to the point. Assuming everything checks out, we'll need about 7 days, Jake explained. 2 of my people will handle surveillance. We'll collect enough information for you to decide your next move. The fee is $10,000. If you're ready, Sheila will take care of the paperwork, and we can get started by Wednesday. 10 grand was a steep price, but all things considered, I thought it was necessary. I agreed, shook Jake's hand, and signed the documents with his assistant. When Friday night rolled around, I found myself back at the office, nerves on edge. Jake greeted me with, "There's some good news and some bad news." "Let's hear it," I replied. Jake began. "The good news is, your wife hasn't been intimate with this guy. At least not yet. His name's Damian Taylor." Damian Taylor, Heather's boss. I'd met him at her company parties a few times, never liked him much, and I doubted he thought much of me either. He always spoke to me in a condescending way. I had to admit, though, he was attractive, athletic, and around my age. As all this ran through my mind, I realized Jake was waiting for me to catch up. He was perceptive. He knew just when to pause. I gave him a nod to continue. "The bad news," Jake said, "is that she's close to crossing the line. He's invited her to a conference out of town in 3 weeks. She hasn't agreed yet, but she's thinking about it. My people watched them both on Wednesday and Thursday. One sat near them at a diner, the other followed them the next day. Neither of them suspected a thing, trust me. There were no obvious signals, no touching, no lingering stares, nothing physical yet. We succeeded in getting audio on both occasions. The team employed custom cases outfitted with directional microphones to capture everything. I'll give you both discs. Yes, they're on CDs, so you can evaluate them yourself. Just a heads up, there's quite a bit of background noise. You may need to replay the tracks a few times to catch all the details." Jake let me borrow the CDs, and I treated them as though they were evidence in a criminal case. But that wasn't all. Based on what we overheard on Wednesday, I made the decision to follow Taylor that evening after he left work, and again on Thursday. On Wednesday night, he simply went home. Thursday was different. He left the office and met up with another man at a bar. They acted as if they didn't care who might notice them together. I couldn't hear every exchange, but I caught enough to realize that your wife wasn't their first target. After piecing together what I'd overheard, I was able to verify this morning that the other man was Jackson Yates, Taylor's boss. Apparently, Cassandra Johnson was a previous victim, and now your wife was being lined up to take her place. Yates questioned Taylor about how things were progressing with your wife, criticizing him when Taylor admitted she was keeping her distance. Taylor was convinced he'd break down her resistance during their next business trip, thinking some drinks and dancing would win her over. He also brought up something from the lunch recordings. Taylor had hinted at the possibility of a promotion if your wife agreed to join their program. Jake paused, giving me time to process everything. He offered me some coffee from the pot on his desk, but I was too shaken to accept. Jake continued, I can't stand guys who act like that. Right after I heard what they said, I wrote down every word I could remember. Since their talk happened out in public, there's no assumption of privacy. My notes should be admissible in a civil lawsuit against them and the company. If it comes to that, I'm prepared to testify, either in a deposition or in court. I'll even lower my usual fee if it means seeing those two face consequences. Your expenses so far are already about half of my original estimate. If you want surveillance on your wife over the weekend, it'll probably use up the rest of your retainer. I didn't hesitate for long. No, I'll review the recordings myself. But if what you've told me is the whole story, maybe this is something we can handle privately. I'll talk to her tomorrow. There's no point dragging this out, unless she surprises me somehow. I expect she'll agree to counseling, which could help us. I'm still weighing whether to take legal action. For now, my priority is making sure those two are held accountable. Jake shook my hand, wished me luck, and told me to reach out if I needed further assistance. He said we'd square up the bill next week, just in case. I left the office early and listened to the CDs at home on my computer. During both lunches, Damian Taylor was relentless in his attempts to woo Heather. He even went so far as to accuse me of cheating on her while I was away on business in Dallas. It was a relief to hear Heather defend me every time Taylor tried to undermine my reputation. Taylor kept urging her to accompany him to an upcoming conference, insisting it would boost her career prospects. Taylor said he expected a promotion soon and that Heather would be in line for his job after he moved up. He flattered her, praising her looks, intelligence, and skills. He hinted at meeting her in a private setting, away from work, to see if their connection was more than friendship. Heather cut him off, insisting it was time to get back to the office. That was the last thing captured on Thursday's recording. It was obvious Heather was conflicted but tempted. I could relate. Years ago, I'd found myself in a similar situation. If someone had stepped in back then, maybe my first marriage would have survived. Now it was my responsibility to do what I could to save this one. I called Heather's parents and asked if they could keep the kids over the weekend. Her mom was delighted at the idea. After collecting Seth and Becca from school, we went home, packed their bags, and dropped them off at their grandparents' house for a weekend of being spoiled. Around 5 o'clock, Heather called to ask if she could stay out later with co-workers for drinks. My answer took her by surprise. I need you home right away. We have something serious to discuss. Can't it wait? Not if you want to stay married after this weekend. What's going on? If you're not home in 30 minutes, we're done. Gavin, what are you talking about? What happened? Heather, just come home. I'm not doing this over the phone. I hung up. She walked in 26 minutes later, her eyes red and swollen. Gavin, what's this about divorce? Where are the kids? They're at your parents'. Now tell me what's really going on between you and Damian Taylor. Heather looked completely blindsided, struggling to find her words before she finally spoke. I never cheated on you. I pushed further. There are other ways to betray someone besides sleeping with them. Even if nothing physical happened, lines can still be crossed. Tell me what really went on last Saturday night. She froze. All we did was talk. I swear. Why are you asking about Saturday? Don't you two already have plenty of opportunities to talk at work and over lunch? Was I being watched? Let's not get sidetracked. Let's focus on your Saturday. I swung by Damian's place to pick him up. The two of us spent some time shopping, then grabbed lunch together. When it was time to leave, I dropped him off back at his building. He invited me in, but I declined and made my way home. There was no touching, no hugs, no signs of intimacy. As Damian stepped out of the car, he leaned in for a kiss, but I turned my head, so his lips brushed my cheek instead. That was truly all there was. So he just went shopping with you for the day. Did you buy anything in particular? At that, Heather's complexion turned ashen. A dress and something else. Wait right here. I hurried upstairs to check her wardrobe. Tucked behind a row of business attire, I discovered a shopping bag. Inside were a fitted black dress, a pair of heels, and, to my shock, white silk lingerie. My jaw set as I returned downstairs. What was going on? Heather hid her face, crying since I'd left the room. Damien talked me into buying the dress and heels in case I agreed to join him at the conference next month. If I decided against that, he said I could wear them for a night out with you. And the lingerie? Heather broke down again. I'm sorry, she said. He was the one who picked those out for me. What were you thinking? Honestly, I wasn't sure, but I swear I never let things go too far. No, there was never anything physical, but I couldn't even finish the sentence. Are you considering leaving me? That depends. Do you still want this marriage? Are you ready to keep Taylor out of our lives forever? Yes, I want to stay with you. I've never doubted us, and you shouldn't either. I promise I'll never be alone with Damien again. Heather got up, crossed the room, and settled on my lap, pressing her head against my chest. Her apologies were soft, voice shaking. Please, don't hate me. For a moment I wanted to push her away, but I couldn't do it. I don't hate you, but understand, if our family comes apart over this, that might change. That night, and well into Saturday, Heather and I spent hours discussing how we could move forward. By Sunday morning, when we went to pick up the kids, any lingering doubt about her commitment to our family was gone. We agreed to start marriage counseling together. Heather had to grapple with her loyalty to us versus the pull of an affair, and it became obvious Damien Taylor was manipulative. Heather told me that Monday morning, Taylor had asked if I'd noticed her new clothes. When she replied that I hadn't checked the bag, he used it against me. See, your husband doesn't care. He probably has someone else. I told Heather the only reason I hadn't said anything was because I'd begun to suspect something was wrong and needed space to figure out how to respond. That's when I realized I owed Heather the truth about my first marriage, the real reason it failed, and how close I'd come to repeating my mistakes. I thought a counselor could help me share my past in a way that wouldn't damage our relationship further. Truthfully, we both needed some help, and the right therapist could make a difference. We also decided to contact Heather's HR department and formally report Taylor. Heather was rattled by Jake Sullivan's notes about Taylor's conduct, and rumors about Cassandra Johnson's abrupt, silent exit were circulating through the office. Heather hesitated until we saw our therapist on Tuesday. The counselor encouraged her, and together we returned the dress, shoes, and lingerie. As much as I might have wanted to see Heather in that dress or lingerie, I couldn't bear the thought of her wearing anything Taylor had picked out. A year has passed since that tumultuous weekend. Both Damien Taylor and Jackson Yates lost their jobs following Heather's report. After HR reviewed audio recordings, Jake Sullivan's notes, and conducted additional interviews, neither Taylor nor Yates received any severance. They were dismissed on the spot. Heather heard rumors that they threatened lawsuits, but those quickly vanished once they were warned about possible counterclaims. Legally. Our attorney received a letter from Heather's employer with a generous settlement offer, which she accepted, ending the matter. We thought about taking further action, but the company acted swiftly and responsibly, removing the offenders and compensating Heather. Counseling sessions had a real impact on us. Heather was stunned when she heard the truth about the end of my first marriage. She was hurt to learn, in our first session, just how close I'd come to being unfaithful myself. I told her because I wanted her to know she wasn't alone in her struggles with temptation. Our marriage could only grow if the burden didn't rest solely on her shoulders. Ultimately, neither of us had been unfaithful indeed, which, while still painful, allowed us to forgive. Honestly, Heather and I are in a better place now than we've ever been. The kids are thriving, and parenting is so much smoother when both partners are in sync and committed. We both learned important lessons. First, never look outside your marriage for emotional support that rightfully belongs to your spouse, especially not with someone who could come between you. What seems harmless at first can easily escalate. Second, if you'd be embarrassed to tell your partner about something, that's a sign you shouldn't be doing it. Third, always communicate. If your marriage is struggling, talk about it. I'm realistic. Some marriages can't be saved by honesty alone, but if yours is worth fighting for, make open conversation your priority. That's what I've learned. Take it for what it's worth. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.